What if I told you that Tom Bombadil, yes, that cheerful singing forest dweller, once sat face to face with the Witch-king of Angmar, not in battle, not by accident, but in a secret meeting no one was supposed to know about? This isn't fan fiction. This is Tolkien's world, pieced together from the gaps, whispers, and old words buried in the Lord of the Rings, the Silmarillion, and his letters. Today we dive into one of Middle-earth's most mysterious what-ifs, and it starts with a question nobody's asking. How much does Tom Bombadil really know about the Rings of Power? Tom Bombadil doesn't care about the One Ring, or so he says. In the Fellowship of the Ring, when Frodo offers it to him, Tom slips it on like it's nothing. He doesn't vanish, he laughs. It doesn't affect him, but here's the thing. You Dante just ignore the One Ring unless you know exactly what it is, and probably a whole lot more. Gandalf himself admits later in the Council of Elrond that Tom might be older than the world's current memory. He existed before the elves awakened, before Sauron served more. That's First Age level knowledge, or even earlier. And the Rings of Power were forged in the Second Age. Tom's been around longer than the concept of rings, so what if he actually understands their creation better than Celebrimbor did? Now here's where it gets interesting. Some passages in the history of Middle-earth suggest that the crafting of the rings was entirely isolated to a region. There were older forms of enchanted items, powers of binding and dominion, echoing into the roots of Arda. What if Bombadil saw all of it unfold and stayed quiet, not because he was clueless, but because he knew too much? When the Witch-king rises in the north, spreading terror across Arna, Tom doesn't get involved. He never leaves the old forest. But the Nazgul never enter it either. There's no recorded attack, no scouting, like they know better. That's not fear of trees. It's fear of who lives inside them, and what he might say if they got too close. So what if there was a time long before Frodo's journey when the Witch-king sought knowledge? Not to destroy Tom, but to learn from him, maybe even to understand the full extent of the ring's dominion. Because the Witch-king didn't just serve Sauron, he believed in the power of domination. And if anyone knew how to resist it, it was Bombadil. And maybe that's the exact reason why the ring couldn't bind Tom, because he had already seen its nature and rejected it, not from innocence, but from full awareness. Before Sauron crowned himself Lord of the Rings, before Rosen fell, there were forces in Middle-earth that shaped its laws in silence. Tom Bombadil wasn't just there, he was part of it. And there's a theory buried deep in Tolkien's metaphysical hints that Tom and the Witch-king once shared an oath, a binding truce older than the Second Age, sealed in shadows, now lost to time. You won't find this spelled out in the Lord of the Rings, but in the Silmarillion we're told that oaths held great power, even shaping the fates of elves and men alike. The Oath of Fëanor led to centuries of bloodshed. So what if Bombadil, being this ancient being that predates even the elves, once struck a pact with the Witch-king before he was corrupted by Sauron? Think about it. The Witch-king wasn't born evil. He was once a king of men, wise, powerful, probably a Numenorean of high stature. And in the early Third Age, as Arnor fractured and evil crept north, there might have been one last attempt to preserve peace. A meeting in secret, far from the eyes of Valar or elf lords, deep in the old forest where time barely moves. The oath wouldn't have been about friendship. It would have been about balance. Stay out of the old forest. Leave the Barrow-downs alone. Don't disturb the ancient dead. And in return, Bombadil wouldn't interfere in the wars of men or the rise of Angmar. A neutral zone held by forces older than either of them. A truce of necessity, not trust. This would explain why the Witch-king, for all his power, never dares set foot in Tom's lands. Not once in the entire war against Arna does he cross into that shadowy forest. And it's not like the Nazgul were afraid of trees. They walked through Mordor for Eru's sake. They feared what lived inside the silence. Maybe breaking the oath would have cost the Witch-king something Sauron couldn't protect. And maybe, just maybe, that truth still holds by the time Frodo enters the old forest. That's why the Ringwraiths circle the Shire but never breach Tom's domain, because somewhere, buried deep in their undead memory, an oath still whispers, "Do not cross." Tom Bombadil speaks in song. It's quirky, sure, but it's also powerful. We see it when he commands Old Man Willow and again when he frees the hobbits from the Barrow-wight. His words don't just rhyme, they bind. And in Middle-earth, words carry real weight. Oaths, names, spells, they're all part of the same ancient language of power. So when Tom met the Witch-king, it wasn't a duel of swords, it was a duel of language, a bargain sealed in rhymes. Now imagine this. The Witch-king, cloaked and silent, steps into the edge of the old forest, uninvited but not aggressive. He seeks something, maybe knowledge, maybe control, but instead of finding fear or resistance, he's met with a riddle, a song, a voice that disarms him with familiarity, not confrontation. And in that moment something ancient kicks in, a game of words like the duels of old, when Mayor debated with Mayor or when Melkor twisted truth with half-songs and promises. There's precedent for this in Tolkien's world. In the Silmarillion, Finrod Felagund, duel Sauron in song, an actual contest of power and identity. They chant back and forth, shaping visions and illusions. So why wouldn't Bombadil, who might be even older than Sauron, use the same technique against the Witch-king? Except instead of destruction, his goal is containment. Maybe Bombadil didn't just resist the Witch-king. Maybe he wrapped him in verse, trapped him in a verbal loop that limited what the Nazgul could do near the forest. A soft kind of magic, untraceable, unrecorded, no flashy lights, just words that stick. Hop along, my little shadow, he might have whispered. Darkness fades where old songs echo, and here's the craziest part. The Witch-king might have accepted it, not because he wanted to, but because he was outmatched in that one arena. In raw force, sure, he's terrifying, but in the subtle arts of ancient songcraft against a being like Bombadil, that's a losing fight. So instead, they made a bargain, temporary, conditional, a rhyming truce. And this would explain why the Ringwraiths always avoid direct conflict with Bombadil's land. They can't operate there, not fully. The magic isn't just physical, it's linguistic, it's in the song. And once you're caught in Bombadil's rhythm, maybe you never quite get free. Most folks skim past the Barrow-downs. Just another creepy pit stop before Bree, right? But that place is loaded with lore, ancient tombs, cursed spirits, and memories from a time before Gondor even existed. And who shows up there just in time to stop the hobbits from getting sacrificed by a Barrow-wight? Tom Bombadil, like he was waiting. But what if those Barrow-wights weren't just random evil spirits? In The Return of the King Appendix, Tolkien hints that the Barrow-downs were once sacred burial sites for the kings of Dolan, a northern realm of Arna. When the Witch-king of Angmar invaded, he sent evil spirits out of Angmar to possess the tombs, and just like that, the dead stopped resting. So why hasn't Tom cleansed the place entirely? He clearly can. With one song, he banishes the Barrow-wight. But he doesn't go deeper, he doesn't destroy the curse. Maybe because he can't. Or maybe because the Witch-king didn't bring the evil, he unlocked something older, something even Tom can't fully undo. That's where their meeting might have happened, not in the woods but inside a barrow. Picture it, two figures, one light, one shadow, speaking over the bones of forgotten kings. The Witch-king drawn by the echoes of ancient magic, Tom guarding it not with weapons, but with presence. Maybe they didn't fight because they both needed something buried there. Maybe they were both trying to keep something worse from waking. And here's a chilling possibility. What if some of the wights were never truly defeated? What if Tom's songs only hold them back temporarily? That would explain why Frodo's rescue feels so last second, like Tom was waiting, watching, unsure if the wight would go too far this time, like a deal had been broken, or was about to be. So when the Witch-king approached the Barrow-downs again, maybe it wasn't to spread fear, it was to see if the old power still slept, and Tom Bombadil met him there like a warden at the gate of death, reminding him, not yet. You know that line during the Battle of the Pelennor Fields, no living man may hinder me, it's legendary. Eowyn breaks the prophecy, slays the Witch-king, and we all cheer. But here's a thought. What if the Witch-king already knew that line long before the battle? What if someone told him? Someone like Tom Bombadil. It's not that crazy. In the Silmarillion, prophecies aren't just divine messages. They're often warnings or pieces of hidden knowledge passed between powerful beings. And Tom, being who he is, probably sees the threads of fate more clearly than anyone else still walking Middle-earth. So imagine this. During their secret meeting, the Witch-king tries to understand the limits of his power. He knows Sauron gave him immortality. He knows fear is his weapon. But he doesn't know what might break that curse. So he asks, maybe not directly, but in riddles, in the kind of coded conversation that ancient beings like them would have. And Tom, cryptic as always, gives an answer that isn't an answer. No man may end thee, yet end thee shall be. Eyes of fear, blade unseen, strike thee where none has been. Something like that. Rhyming, vague, but sharp enough to plant a seed. Now fast forward to the Third Age. The Witch-king rides with confidence, believing that prophecy shields him. He's heard it before. He thinks it means invincibility, but he misunderstood because he took Bombadil's riddle as assurance, not a warning. That's the irony. He got the truth, but not the meaning. This also lines up with Tolkien-esque notes in Unfinished Tales, where he explores the limits of fate and prophecy. The Witch-king's arrogance isn't just personal, it's based on something. Maybe even on a half-remembered meeting in the Barrow-downs or the old forest where a strange being in yellow boots sang riddles that sounded like nothing and meant everything. And when Eowyn stood before him on that battlefield, perhaps in that final moment, the Witch-king remembered the words. Maybe he finally understood them right as they came true. Let's talk about something nobody gives enough attention to. The old forest is untouched, while the rest of Middle-earth gets torn up by war, corrupted by Sauron's influence, or overrun by darkness. Tom Bombadil's territory stays completely off-limits. No orcs, no Nazgul, not even rumors of scouting parties. That's not an accident. That's protection. Tom never calls himself a guardian, but he acts like one. When the hobbits enter his forest, he rescues them multiple times. First from Old Man Willow, then from the Barrow-wight, and he never hesitates. He doesn't need time to prepare. It's like he knows exactly when and where to be. That doesn't happen unless someone's keeping watch constantly. Now, think bigger. What if Tom isn't just protecting the hobbits or the forest? What if he's guarding something hidden, something deliberately kept from the eyes of Sauron and his servants? In the history of Middle-earth, there are mentions of relics and knowledge from the First Age that were never fully recovered. Artifacts, songs, maybe even remnants of Valinor's power that were buried or lost during the War of Wrath. That forest, with its ancient silence and time-warped edges, could be where some of that was hidden. And Bombadil, he's the last one who remembers where. Maybe the Witch-king knew that. Maybe that's why he approached Tom in the first place. Not to fight, but to search, to see if there was anything left that could be twisted, stolen, or used. But Tom, being who he is, didn't respond with force. He didn't shout or raise weapons. He simply existed there, immovable, unknowable. A wall of peace so strong that not even the Nine dared to press against it. And in that way, he becomes something we rarely see in Tolkien's world, a guardian who wins by not playing the game. And that's why the meeting mattered. It wasn't a negotiation, it was a reminder. Tom Bombadil doesn't leave the forest, not because he's lazy or aloof, but because he's stationed. He's holding something back. And the Witch-king knew he couldn't get past him. Here's something that doesn't get talked about enough. Both Tom Bombadil and the Witch-king are basically immortal, but in completely opposite ways. One lives because he has life untouched by time. The other lives because he's been cursed, bound to a shadow that won't let him die. So when they met, it wasn't just a conversation. It was a collision of two immortalities. One pure, one corrupted. Tom's immortality is effortless. He doesn't fear Sauron, he doesn't age, and the ring has zero effect on him. Gandalf says he is his own master. That line isn't casual, it's huge. It means he doesn't fall under the authority of the Valar, the rings, or even the rhythms of Arda. That's not normal. That's foundational. And if anyone in Middle-earth should be curious or terrified about that kind of power, it's the Witch-king. By contrast, the Witch-king's immortality is a prison. His soul is anchored to his ring. And over time his identity fades until all that's left is shadow and will. He doesn't live, he persists. And if there's one thing the Nazgul crave, it's what they lost. The ability to just be. Tom stands as a brutal reminder of what the Witch-king can never return to. So maybe their meeting was more than tactical. Maybe it was personal. The Witch-king trying to understand what he once was, hoping in some twisted part of him that Tom could explain why he can die or why the ring didn't work on him. And Tom, seeing a broken soul wearing a crown of fear, might have given him something no one else could. Recognition, not pity, just understanding. And that's terrifying in itself, because if Tom Bombadil can see what's left of the Witch-king's soul, if he can reach it, even for a moment, it proves something Sauron never wanted confirmed. The Nazgul are not beyond redemption. There's still a piece of them that remembers. That meeting then becomes more than a lore curiosity. It's a point where shadow and light see each other clearly. No fighting, no shouting. Just two beings who've outlived everything else, wondering what that even means anymore. There's a reason nobody can follow Tom Bombadil. Not the hobbits, not the elves, not even the Nazgul. He walks roads that don't appear on any map, paths that shift behind him. Tolkien drops little hints in the Fellowship of the Ring when Tom leads the hobbits out of the Barrow-downs. It's like the world rearranges itself around his footsteps. That's not just local magic, that's cosmic-level movement. Now picture this. The Witch-king, in his early days as the Lord of Angmar, tries to press south to crush the remnants of Arnor. He sends scouts, wraiths, wolves. None of them come back. Not because they were killed, but because they got lost, turned around, trapped in a maze of space and time that doesn't obey Sauron's rules. That's when the Witch-king decides to investigate himself. He gets close. Too close. And then Bombadil appears, not to threaten him but to guide him away. Not in fear but as a warning, like, this isn't for you, not yet, maybe never. He doesn't use force because he doesn't need to. He just walks. And the Witch-king, despite all his power, follows. Not because he's forced, but because he has no other option. It's not hard to imagine that scene. Tom leading the Witch-king through twisting forest trails, ancient roots, and flickers of light that don't obey the sun. No conversation, just presence. And at the edge, when the air shifts and the shadows thin, Tom turns and says something quiet, final, maybe a line like, "The road behind is closed. The path ahead, not yours." This also lines up with Tolkien's deeper writings, especially in the history of Middle-earth, where he explores thin places, spots in Arda, where the veil between worlds is weak. Tom may live at the center of one, a crossroads between the visible and the invisible. The Witch-king, he's stuck in one realm, half spirit, half corpse. He can't cross fully, and he knows it. So that meeting wasn't just a boundary, it was a test. The Witch-king wanted to reach something deeper, maybe to twist it, maybe to understand it, but Bombadil simply led him out. No threat, no violence, just a silent message. Some paths aren't meant for you. Tom Bombadil's songs aren't just background noise. They do things, real things. He calms storms. He commands trees. He casts out wraiths. Every time he sings, the world listens. So what happens when someone like the Witch-king, who lives in silence and terror, encounters a voice that builds instead of breaks? What if just once he tried to sing back? It's not far-fetched. In the Silmarillion, we learn that the world itself was sung into being. The Ainulindala, the music of the Ainur, was literally a divine song, and Tolkien makes it clear. All power in Arda is connected to that original music. So beings like Bombadil and the Witch-king, they're not just random anomalies. They're part of that song in wildly different ways. Now imagine this moment. The Witch-king steps into the edge of Tom's land. No armies, no screaming wind, just silence. And Tom greets him, not with a challenge, but with music. Something low, old, woven with words the Witch-king hasn't heard since before his fall. For a moment he listens. Then maybe he responds, not in melody, but in a kind of dissonant counter-rhythm. A duet that's not meant to harmonize, just to exist. And it builds. Not loud, not violent, just deep. A song of nature and shadows circling each other. One lifting, one dragging, both pulling on something ancient. But before it can finish, Tom stops. Not out of fear, but out of wisdom. He sees what could happen if the song continued. If their powers fused even briefly, the balance could tip. Something new might be created. Something neither of them could control. So the moment ends. The Witch-king says nothing. He turns and leaves. Tom says nothing either, just watches. Maybe hums a softer tune because he knows the truth. Not all songs should be finished. Some melodies are better left unresolved because if they resolve, they change the world. And that unfinished song, it might still echo in the trees. Maybe that's why the old forest feels so strange, like it's waiting for a second verse that never came. The Witch-king, ruled by fear, pure, crushing, paralyzing dread. Even the bravest warriors, Boromir, Gandalf, Aragorn, felt it when he drew near. But Tom Bombadil, he laughs in the Witch-king's presence. Literally. Not just because he's cheerful, but because he doesn't recognize fear the way others do. And that's exactly what unnerves the Witch-king most. Let's not forget the Ringwraiths are terrifying, not just because of what they do, but because of what they are. They're echoes, unliving, half invisible, feeding off fear like it's fuel. And when someone resists that fear, really resists it, their power breaks. That's what happens with Eowyn. That's what happens with Frodo in Mordor. But with Tom, it's like fear can't even find a place to start. So when the Witch-king first encountered Tom, he probably expected the usual, the cold, the silence, the collapse of will, but none of it landed. No shivers, no hesitation. Just Tom standing there, boots muddy, singing something about butter and bread. And for the first time in a long time, the Witch-king wasn't the scariest thing in the room. Because fear doesn't know what to do with joy. It has no counter to peace. That's why Sauron fears the West, not for their armies, but for their hope. Tom embodies that same idea, but in raw, undiluted form. He isn't afraid. Not because he's naive, but because he's rooted deeper than Angmar, deeper than Mordor. That kind of presence, unshakable, unmovable, is the one thing the Witch-king can't corrupt, and maybe that's why he never returns. Not because he was beaten in battle, but because he saw something he couldn't break. A man, not elf, not mayor, not wizard, just a being living freely, untouched by the shadow. And for someone like the Witch-king who lost everything to the darkness, that kind of existence isn't just impossible, it's offensive. So, in the end, maybe their secret meeting wasn't about strategy or power. Maybe it was just a moment of truth, a living echo of everything the Witch-king used to be and could never be again. Now, here's the real question. Do you think this meeting actually happened? Was it buried in Tolkien's lore on purpose? Or are we just chasing echoes in the trees? What would you ask Tom Bombadil if you had one chance? And if the Witch-king ever returns in another tale, would he dare step into that forest again? Middle-earth still holds secrets.